So good morning, everyone, and welcome to today's knowledge session brought to you by OPPI India and Indegene on the impact of ChatGPT on life sciences. Um, a quick reminder to please stay muted and switch off the cameras. Thank you so much. OPPI would like to thank today's speakers, the moderator for today's session, Mr. Manoj Saxena, President-elect OPPI and Managing Director, Bayer Zydus Pharma, and Country Division Head, South Asia Pharmaceuticals. Welcome, Manoj, and thanks for joining in.
Sabri, you're on mute.
Hi, sorry, I think I followed my instructions to the queue. So welcome everyone to today's session. Let me also welcome our speakers and moderator for today's session, Mr. Manoj Saxena, President-elect OPPI and Managing Director, Bayer Zydus Pharma, and Country Division Head, South Asia Pharmaceuticals. Welcome, Manoj, and thanks for joining in.
Thanks, Sabri.
We also welcome our guest speaker for today, Mr. Tarun Mathur, Chief Technology Officer at Indegene. Welcome, Tarun, and thanks for joining in today.
Thank you. Good to be here.
In a recent conversation between Economic Times and OpenAI, the company that has developed ChatGPT, its CEO Sam Altman has raised the issues of regulating AI softwares and platforms of a certain scale, of course, and of forming policies around such technologies. I think what we understand, therefore, is that AI is fast becoming a reality, not only across the globe, but also in our daily lives. And sort of understanding its nuances, the opportunities that it throws open, and the risks that come with it. I think it's becoming even more important to understand these issues. So today's discussion is therefore, not only relevant but also most opportune in this context. And let me hand it over to our moderator Manoj to start with this session. Thank you, and over to you, Manoj.
Hey, good morning, everyone, and this is a topic which is trending. So, and that's why what we see the response as well, Tarun. Yeah, thank you for joining in. I know it's a slightly difficult time for you from a time zone perspective, but really, it's a pleasure and honor to host you for such a topic which is which generates curiosity from everyone. Yeah, 1 million users of ChatGPT in 5 days. And I was looking at our clock here. We had over 100 participants in a virtual format in just 1 minute. Yeah. So I guess ChatGPT is something which is an area of interest for everyone. Can I request everyone to be on mute? And on that, I guess while the whole topic. Okay. I hope ChatGPT also finds a solution to mute not the speakers but the participants. Yeah, I'm sure we'll get to that at some point of time, Tarun. But as you know, as ChatGPT is an interesting space, everybody looks at how important it would be and what opportunities and revolutionary potential it is. I think it's well recognized, but there are also potentially some concerns and limitations. Yeah, and that's what be our focus today, Tarun, with your expertise as the CTO for Indegene. Let me begin with something which I guess everybody is grappling with. Yeah, as an individual, as employees of organizations, but also I guess a lot of people are on their own in startups. We always have looked at human intelligence versus artificial intelligence, right? The chat GPT is actually human intelligence plus artificial intelligence. Yeah. How do you think we should start preparing ourselves, both as individuals, but also as people, which is the biggest resources for organizations?
Oh, and thanks for having me. And yeah, it's good to be in this forum and and have all this interest in the topic. Like you said, it certainly is the trending topic for the day. On this issue, we tend to look at it as you rightly did, breaking it into two lenses, right? From the personal perspective, there are a lot of concerns about what does this mean for the jobs, what's the economic impact of it, a lot of personal issues do arise from it, and we're seeing different countries take different stances on potentially bringing in legislation to perhaps slow the growth in some areas. Not every country is adopting the similar approach. I think currently India, for example, is a bit more open on this. They're fostering innovation with it doesn't, right, at least at this moment in time, not so much on the restriction as compared to like the EU, right, and the ongoing discussions in the US. At an individual level, it certainly behooves us to understand the what kind of an impact this space has. And when we talk about ChatGPT, I'm actually looking at the generative AI landscape in general, right? ChatGPT is a specific around text, but generative AI is having impact on voice, on video, on images across all modalities. And the reality is we do have to recognize there's a major inflection in technology that's happening now, and it will be disruptive to our landscape. And it's a little bit easier to predict which jobs will be impacted and feel the risk. It's very hard to predict what new opportunities and new jobs will be created, but that does happen, right? Anytime there's a major technology revolution, a new industries are created, new job categories are created. How we manage that, how we deal with that is tough. My feeling is, and I can even speak from personal experience with my own family. I have kids who are in college and thinking about their future. That we're looking to see what the roles going forward are likely to be augmented with some form of these advanced generative AI. Now, the human in the loop factor is still relevant, right? I mean, right now, during this hype cycle, I think there's a lot of overestimation of what these language models can do, at least at this moment in time. So you have to be a little bit realistic about it, but also think about processes, think about roles, think about industries where the humans are human intelligence is augmented by these technologies, and the value add we can add on top of it. So it's a tough space to be in. At the enterprise, at the business level, it's very different, right? We're looking at productivity improvement. We're looking at new opportunities on revenue, new opportunities on margin growth. The usual metrics that we're tracking. So you have those kind of typical conflating interests, but it's challenging times, I'd say, and early days.
No, that's excellent. So if I have to really, pin down on one thing, we all are professionals, and I guess you did discuss about your family, and I could imagine a youngster's familiarity with ChatGPT, but also people who are in the industry. And we'll come to the healthcare topics in terms of usage and all. But essentially, if you have to give an advice for an individual that, let's understand ChatGPT, how can it influence your work, your experience, what that would be, what they can do to prepare themselves well so that they become sort of digital or native in the artificial intelligence world.
Well, I think with the currency, what I've been recommending to friends and family is this is about communication. End of the day, so the stronger skills you have in being able to articulate, define, communicate. That communication is not just from person to person, but now it's person to machine, and vice versa. So understanding the best practices and understanding how to be an effective communicator, that is certainly an important part of it. And also appreciating, understanding the world around us in terms of the data sets available. These systems, they're trained by data, right? They're not, none of these generative AI systems are doing independent research in labs on their own and coming up with new concepts, right? There from that lens, they're relying on human intelligence and being trained with that. And you had pointed that out at the outset. So how do you contribute to that ecosystem, right? That's I think there's a lot of strong potential in the future, and the more you are in terms of a holder of valuable knowledge, assets, and data, then the more I think power you have going forward. So definitely communication, understanding data, understanding the value of data, and appreciating it, how to curate it, how to, and also, and it's generative AI certainly amplified it, but your ability to discern fact from fiction, being able to understand biases, even basic statistics, those kinds of things are going to become critical going forward, right? We're already seeing so much false information being spread by these systems. And we live in a world that has a lot of adversaries who try to contaminate the system. So the more discerning, educated you are in being able to deal with that, the better.
Yeah, no, that's excellent. And we'll come to those aspects, which are the challenges or limitations. But, and I'll keep it broad still, and then I'll move to the specifics in healthcare is, if someone asks you, what is artificial intelligence powered chatbot in 2023, and how do so if you have to explain it in a simplified manner, what that would be?
In 2023, yeah, we can talk about it a bit. So what I would say is that these are systems. It's a chatbot that simulates the human experience at an unprecedented level, because these systems simulate human conversations and interactions at a fidelity and at a quality that we haven't seen before. And it's done by those systems consuming massive amounts of intelligence and synthesizing it in tremendous ways. So I give this example, we haven't gotten into healthcare yet, but in patient engagement, for example, a lot of us are enrolled in some sort of program through your doctor's office, the hospital, or through a drug maker, where we get notifications about maybe refill reminders, or you get survey questions about your experiences with a certain drug. Those, we're used to being marketed, or we're used to being communicated by enterprises by these kind of push messages. We know when a bot is sending us messages. All of us, I'm sure, get spam text messages and those things on our phones. But you can see now a world where that interaction starts to shift into one that now I can respond back, right? And I can actually have a conversation with those systems. And that conversation is becoming much more tailored towards me and starts to understand me. And we're seeing from 2023, as we go in 2024 and onwards, we're seeing these opportunities where these systems get access to not only large knowledge that's been trained across internet and other sources, but even our own personal data, right? You can imagine if these ChatGPT, for example, had your entire email inbox, your credit card history, and your medical records as part of a training set, then the kinds of conversations you could have are at a whole other level. So when someone asks me today, what is that, the difference between the chatbot powered by something like ChatGPT, that's a big part of it, that the experience is at another level compared to what we had seen before.
Yeah, no, thanks, Tarun. Coming specifically for the, on the topic of today's discussion, which is for our industry, the life science healthcare industry, can you help us to understand, the opportunities which the artificial intelligence today offers, things, with the artificially powered chatbots like ChatGPT for the life sciences, and little bit maybe we dwell on the potential use cases as well, which is already being used today.
Yeah. So we've seen examples, and at Indegene we're also running a lot of these pilots and experiments on our own or in collaboration with some of our pharma partners. But we're seeing from drug discovery, so clinical R&D, clinical trials, all the way through post-commercialization and pharmacovigilance. So pretty much the whole spectrum, we're seeing an impact from generative AI in general. So if we look at clinical trial, for example, so clinical trial matching, patient recruitment, identification, those are being unlocked in novel ways now thanks to generative AI, since it can process massive amounts of unstructured data and make sense out of it better than we could before. On the pharmacovigilance side, being able to actually two areas in there. One is being able to process adverse event cases in a more accelerated way, in a more complete way, but also very importantly, the whole case intake process, right? Today, you have a major problem in the industry that when reports are submitted, follow-ups are typically needed, and those follow-ups are really challenging and expensive. But what if you were able to do a better job of collecting the data on the first connection with the patient or the caregiver? And generative AI can actually really make a big difference there in terms of the experience and virtual, if you call it, quote unquote, interviewing the reporter to get the necessary data. So we're seeing all kinds of impact there. And also behind the scenes. So those are actually the experiences that business stakeholders and patients have. Behind the scenes, this industry has been using artificial intelligence and machine learning models for a while, right? It's not particularly new for us. One of the challenges that we've seen historically is if I'm training a fit for purpose machine learning model, getting access to the data sets to train those models has been a challenge. And so one opportunity is we're seeing growth of these large language models and generative AI that have been pre-trained on massive data sets. That's certainly one way to go. But these models are also, turns out to be particularly apt at generating synthetic data. And synthetic data that's actually grounded on real literature, scientific publications and literature, all that guidance can be used to create new synthetic data sets that are much more grounded in reality. Use that to train your standard ML models, where you can have explainability and controls around those that maybe we're lacking with the generative AI. So we're seeing a wide variety of applications, meta-affairs, document question and answering, right? So being able to have a large collection of documents and being able to have questions answered accurately and concisely with pretty much minimal effort. That's another scenario we're seeing. So.
No, excellent, Tarun. There have been a lot of questions around potential usage in R&D, and medical affairs, and you rightly pinpointed. How do you see it specifically for a country like ours? For example, pharmacovigilance or case reporting is a big topic for us, right? But the industry, I think a lot of companies in the OPPI have a very, very strong process and a protocol for pharmacovigilance. But as a society, it still is evolving. The government is also very keen. How do you think the AI can really help there for a country like ours?
Yeah, I think in India in particular, there's a few areas. Like look at biosimilars, for example, on the drug discovery. So being able to accelerate the basically early drug screening, right? So you have candidate biosimilars. The generative AI can actually make predictions around potential substance interactions with candidate drugs. So you can really make a strong acceleration in that phase of drug research. We've seen other types of models. There's been reaction predictions, right? So synthetic reaction predictions. So a lot of those kinds of modeling and predictions can be done at a different fidelity now with these with the new generative AI, because the effort to train those systems is dramatically reduced. They're pre-trained on massive corpuses, and so then they can start solving for these problems. So I definitely see an impact on drug discovery and research, and it's particularly in biosimilars there. On the other side, precision medicine also. So being able to individualize treatment plans, even do in a drug research, certainly being able to design better molecules that are targeted for specific demographic segments, particularly patient populations that maybe are unique to India. That's a great space that can happen here, right? Because otherwise, these efforts tend to be more generalized. But now we can start to narrow it at a higher level of precision. So I see that, and on the sales side, also how we go to market with products, how we engage with physicians, the ability to not only support the sales teams by sales support and Q&A efforts, but also the physicians being able to have product questions answered more rapidly, triaged more accurately. Those kinds of experiences can be brought forth by the life sciences industry in India and tailored for the population in a much better way than we could with other tools.
Actually, there were a lot of questions on the commercial, essentially go-to-market approaches. Do you see that it's coming very, very soon, or still we are quite far from really to that extent where the HCPs are communicating through a chatbot?
I think right now, what we're seeing and talking to some of our partners as well, the shift has been more incremental, right? Everyone's still trying to figure out what are the risks, what are the issues with it, and change management and change in behavior is always its own issue. So we're seeing some incremental adjustment. I don't think physicians are going to move towards a having a chatbot as a primary way of engaging with the sales and marketing team, but it's part of the omni-channel experience. It'll just kind of gradually be folded into the mix more. What we're seeing today is that the adoption of these tools are being used more by the sales team in order to make better sales plans, better predictions, better forecasting, identifying better segments, creating better content, more personalized content, and bringing that into an omni-channel campaign. And I think it'll be some time before we start seeing the chatbot become the sales vehicle, at least in our point of view.
Yeah, I mean, if you remember, one of the jokes floating around during COVID was, who is the trigger for digitalization? Is it the CTO, is it CEO, or COVID itself? Yeah, and probably today with the whole focus on ChatGPT, at least it's putting some of the aspects what you just narrated, right, from a go-to-market model. How do you utilize a multi-channel model where the auto-generative chatbots sort of a thing could be used properly? Yeah. We discussed a lot around the potential usage, but the flip side to it is, that while we look at the opportunities, there are also ethical considerations. Yeah, there are challenges associated with it. Whether we get informed consent, what about the data privacy, what about patient data, their privacy concerns. How should we, how do we look at it? Also, how are the regulations evolving? You did discuss about India as well in terms of the regulations. Maybe a little bit throw light as to how do you see it, and what are the concerns, and how can we overcome those?
Yeah, and I think that is super critical, right? And is probably the one biggest cause of concern, fear, uncertainty, doubt that comes in using these technologies in healthcare and life sciences. People are wondering, well, if I start asking medical questions to these systems, then is it storing all of that data? Could someone start to see my records? And here, I think those are valid concerns because it's unclear. We saw with ChatGPT a little while ago with Samsung, right? The issue that sensitive information at Samsung was revealed right through the chat GPT. Now I know some of those things are starting to be addressed, but I would, as anyone would be, I would be cautious about the usage of this with sensitive medical data at this point. Now there are strong efforts to deal with this. So partly on the regulation side. So how do we bring about regulations that enforce these kinds of privacy controls, just like we have prior to generative AI. We're working on some of these efforts. They've just been accelerated now. And also, I think, especially with the generative AI, the large infrastructure companies in particular who are building the big models are seeing this kind of pushback as well. And so you think about ChatGPT, that's a language model that's been trained for the general purpose. It's massive. We're starting to see more ecosystem of these specialized models, ones that are meant only for healthcare, only for finance, I saw one recently that was launched just for psychiatry, right? And the advantage there isn't just that they've been trained for that industry, but then since it's for that industry, the transparency around how was it trained, so someone can audit it and come back and say, well, it looks like you trained it with biased data, right? So it's unfair. So that kind of clarity and openness about how these systems have been trained and the ability to audit them, and then wrapping those in those regulatory controls. In the US, we worry about HIPAA controls, for example. That is what we need going forward. And it hasn't happened yet. Right. So the models are being built, they're still being tested, the legal frameworks are still being defined. So when that dust settles, I think we'll feel more comfortable adopting these kind of more advanced use cases where we can start dealing with sensitive data in a more confident way. But I think it is rightly a concern and something that needs to be tracked.
Yeah. I'll take two more questions, quick one, Tarun, and then I guess there's a lot of interest. And I saw some of the hands, so I would request the audience to maybe write it in the chat, whatever questions you have. The first one is a bit related to what you were just saying, is in terms of when we look at this, essentially pharma industry works with partners, right? Partners like Indegene, and today Indegene will start using ChatGPT or similar to ChatGPT, the other AI tools. How do you structure that from a governance framework for so we are not talking about what pharma does to the customers, but essentially how do you take the potential usage of ChatGPT in an existing contract where you're working closely with the pharma?
So we feel it's important to be transparent when we're using the generative AI because and different pharma companies have themselves adopted different policies. Some organizations have banned the usage of ChatGPT completely. Other ones have different types of controls around it. At Indegene, what we've done is we've centralized the governance around our usage of the overall generative AI landscape, not only for our internal tooling, but also in our solutions that we put out there. And what this team does is it regularly reviews, audits, and it makes decisions about what platforms are suitable for us to adopt and take forward and which ones we think have too much risk. So for example, OpenAI ChatGPT itself as a tool is something that we don't permit at our organization because if you go to their own website and read their disclosure statements, you can see that they're not really protecting or guaranteeing protection of your data. However, if you use the same models through Azure, so Azure has an OpenAI cognitive AI services, you can actually engage with Microsoft to set up the appropriate levels of data privacy controls over there with your BA agreements and those things in place. So at our company, we monitor those things, we share them with our customers. It is being used first and foremost as a productivity tool internally, and we do extensive testing on them before we roll them out. And we are running pilots to see if we implement these on the external facing solutions, what are the risks, what are the impact, but we're very transparent about it with our customers. I would not recommend trying to hide the usage of it. It'll bite you later on.
So my last question before we open up for the Q&A is we talked about the usage of the pharma industry, essentially, but also how do you see the AI usage for the stakeholders in the industry? For example, doctors, hospitals, administrative staff, paramedical staff. How do you see and do you have potential use cases there as well? And how do you see the usage there?
I think there's some really exciting opportunities, especially for providers at the point of care. And we're seeing actually there's been some specialized language models that have been specifically designed for this. Google, for example, has MedPalm 2, which is be rolling out shortly. That is really designed for the point of care at the physician's side of things. But we've seen other examples of that. I think it's great because we know that physicians today are overwhelmed by the amount of data available to them, right? Between literature publication, keeping up with that, and now wearables and sensor data and all this whole ecosystem, it's a flood. And being able to take that and have actually proper or deeper level of analytics and insights and predictions presented back to the stakeholders, I think it's a game changer potentially when done right. It can make a big difference in the quality of treatment for patients, the physician's experience, the patient's experience across the board. So we're really excited about the applications of it on that end.
Yeah, beautiful. Tarun, let me reach out to the chat bot and sorry, the chat, not the chat bot, the chat section.
Who knows? Maybe there's a bot in the audience.
Yeah, I think so. Some of them. So let's. Someone is asking actually, Iman, when trying to understand feasible uses of generative AI on commercial side, how do we know that generated synthetic data for that use case is usable?
Yeah, so that's going back to classic data science, right? So you can use these AIs to generate corpuses of synthetic data, but you should never just trust it out of the box, right? As a general guidance. So we have practices for when you have data sets, how do you do the analysis of those to look for issues around biases and drifts and other, it's what proper data science is. So I would do the same thing. The advantage that generative AI gives is that today, in many use cases, you may be dealing with very sparse data, incomplete data, and generative AI can fill in the gaps.
Yeah. Second question is more about the jobs. What kind of jobs will be replaced? I know this is a tough one, and by when? But essentially, can you please share your insights on what kind of jobs would be created, yeah, and what skills would be needed?
Yeah, and that's a really tough space. In terms of jobs being impacted, it's hard to find one that isn't in some way, to be honest, right? And I know within our organization, even from maybe the creative ones, not so much today, though. I would probably say that the writing is on the wall for certain types of what we call creative development that's in our marketing department, at least in life sciences. We're not as creative as as pure artists are. There are controls and constraints which machines actually do well with. So and being able to author content, that's being impacted. And even in the engineering side, certainly it's having a big impact on developers. What I have seen though is the ability to you see new roles such as prompt engineer, for example, is the hottest new position. I recently saw a job posting in San Francisco for some incredible base pay numbers, right? There's a hot market for that. And there will be a new industry that's related to this, what we're calling prompt engineering right now. So being able to effectively use generative AI and how it gets embedded into the real world, I think there's going to be whole new industries and whole new jobs created around that. So remember, generative AI, this whole space, it's just a tool. It's end of the day, it's an AI model. It's a bunch of weights on a bunch of computing servers. How you use it and where it gets implemented, that is, I think, where the new opportunities are going to come from. So I don't think any job is totally safe, outside of the non-portable. Of course, there's, no generative AI is going to become a plumber, right? But in our kind of institutions and large enterprises like ours, many of the roles will see an impact from there.
Yeah, there's Disha asking about essentially your recommendations as to what India should do. And since you have the experience of looking at different countries altogether, right? What could be 1, 2, 3 things which you would see to really harness the true potential of AI? What should India do as of today? Yeah. I mean, this could be an ask, I don't know if for the government, for regulators, but it could be also other stakeholders in the industry. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a funny, and my personal opinion is I think that India is putting a priority on innovation and exploring the opportunities that AI in general is bringing. I actually think that's the right call, especially at this state, the early days of this technology. So I'm not a huge proponent of putting some sort of strong regulatory framework at this point that could potentially restrict innovation, because then this is an opportunity at India to actually become the leader and make a huge impact and take a starring role in this. At some point along the journey, when we will have to put some sort of controls, right? Whether it's around data privacy, the potential impact of malicious use of these technologies, those things should be in place. And I don't know it's hard to predict what the economic impact is. Yes, there are job losses that can be traced to this, but the extent of it, how it will materialize, how it gets offset by new industries and what gets spurred by innovation, that's a really tough call. So my opinion is India is doing the right thing by monitoring it very carefully, taking a very academic view of it, but not necessarily implementing restrictions on the innovation yet.
Yeah, no, I think that's there is one question around a lot around medical affairs. I think you have partly answered that, so we will not repeat it, but also around pharma manufacturing. How do you see AI usage in the manufacturing side of things? Yeah.
Yeah, and in manufacturing, I'm not an expert on manufacturing, but I can tell you what I've been hearing from colleagues and others who are in that space, that at least for example, in the drug R&D side, when they're bringing it to manufacturing, the generative AI being able to predict optimization models at the manufacturing process is apparently quite strong. And so I know that there's a lot of exploration around how can we use generative AI to drive predictions for the manufacturing process, optimizations, cost reductions. and those kinds of issues there. But I think there's potential there, but I'm certainly not an expert on the manufacturing side.
Yeah. There's a question, I think it's a repeat what we have discussed earlier. How do you identify when the model is hallucinating?
Oh yeah, that's a good one. And so I'll tell you what we've done. And I don't think there is a single right answer, but when we run our experiments for generative AI, we've put together a tool set that's very similar for those who are familiar with software engineering. When you build a piece of code, you create a set of unit tests to validate that code. So our tool set creates a number of unit tests for any AI prompt that we create, and then tests basically that prompt against all those unit tests, looking for false information. So it does require human expertise to go through that process. But once you have enough unit tests, enough coverage around it, then you tend to get a little more confidence in the output. That certainly is one way. The other important thing is, to date, we are not counting on using generative AI in isolation. It's always part of a human in the loop process. So that mechanism to take the output of generative AI, send its output to another model that gives you a confidence score, if you will, and then take that confidence score to triage whether it should get routed to a human for review or whether, based upon this critique, that it should be safe. Those are certainly two tactics that we've been taking, but I think it's one of the hotbed issues around how we deal with hallucinations with generative AI is certainly ongoing.
Yeah, there is a lot of talk around gaining efficiencies and cost, yeah, with the usage of AI. So some questions around that. How do you want to answer? Give your thoughts around how such models, yeah, or AI could help in managing costs and bringing more efficiencies.
Yeah, well, in a number of ways. One is you can almost think of these AI as an assistant by your side, right? In certain use cases, it's a productivity tool. So for software engineers, it's a huge benefit in terms of auto code, critiquing code, documenting code. A lot of these tasks get accelerated or done at a higher level of quality using these tools. On the clinical trial side, being able to mine publications and literature and extract information from there at a very high rate. In the past, we had processes that had an army of folks who were reading literature and doing data entry right into structured database systems. Now we're able to automate that substantially. So I think there's productivity materializes in different ways. We set some aggressive targets. So from the experiments, and I would definitely recommend, if you're looking at generative AI and embedding it within your business processes, if you're just targeting a 5% or 8% improvement, then it may be questionable whether the investment and the efforts around and the risks of bringing in generative AI are worth it. There's probably other ways to accomplish it many times. But if you're looking at major disruptions to the processes, then generative AI makes sense. And the one big takeaway that we've seen is that the success with generative AI comes not just from using the tool within our existing business processes, but re-engineering the entire business process around what this can bring to the equation. So sometimes it's shifting authors to reviewers, and what does that mean for your entire workflow and pipeline? So take a look at the big picture view of the business process, and if you brought in generative AI, how would you re-engineer the process? Then you would see, I think, substantial productivity gains.
Yeah, so we have around 3-4 minutes. Maybe last couple of questions. One is very linked. You described about the cost efficiencies and also gave some of the examples on potential areas or functions which are slowly downsizing or massively transforming. Does that mean roles like project management, administrative staffs, those sort of roles would go down significantly?
I think realistically, certain types of roles in that space will be impacted, right? But when I look at project management, there are a lot of aspects of project management that go beyond just the logistics of moving information, forwarding emails, and keeping a schedule, right? The reality is project management has a lot of relationship building to it. It has a lot of analysis, some forecasting. It has other aspects to it. Those will always be human centric, right? And AI will be the assistant. In terms of replacing the roles, I don't think that the AI will completely replace those roles. It's just going to redefine them.
Yeah, and my last question, Tarun, is, as an industry, the reason why or what we do is essentially for the patients, yeah, to give them a better care, to reduce mortality, to reduce morbidity, and to really bring in innovative assets which can really transform the quality of life of patients. Yeah. How do you see the generative AI, impacting on the patients? Yeah.
So I'm the optimist on this. I think that it's going to create a better patient experience, that if somebody who's perhaps suffering a chronic disease or has questions about the state of their health, being able to get quote unquote expert guidance or advice at using these tools, and in a way that is personalized for them, right? And it's very interesting. There was a research study done last October where they took one of these social media platforms where patients could post questions and doctors were responding to it. So they took the human responses and then they took those same questions and had ChatGPT respond to those questions. They randomized it and then sent that to expert clinical reviewers for feedback. The responses from the AI outperformed the human physician responses by a significant orders of magnitude. So on average, I think it was 4.5 times preferred. And a lot of that feedback was there was higher level of accuracy and higher level of empathy expressed by the AI, by GPT, compared to the physicians who responded. And you could see that the physicians on average gave about a 50-word response, where the AI would give almost a 200-word response. So it tried to explain more and engage more. So, I mean, that's just one data point as an example, but I think the ability for you to feel like you have this virtual concierge assistant who's, looking at this landscape of information data and can give you a better healthcare information guidance, I think that's strong. And I look forward to therapy programs that have these digital companions powered by these GPT platforms. I think it can be a huge boon for our patients.
No, great. With that, Tarun, thank you. And let me use the chat GPT to thank you. I just asked them, please give me a thank you note for Tarun. So it says, thank you, Tarun, for your valuable contribution to the panel discussions which OPPI arranged with Indegene on AI in healthcare. Your insights were truly insightful and thought-provoking. I look forward to future collaborations. Yeah, and this is courtesy powered by ChatGPT. Thank you so much, Tarun, from my side as well. Asavri, over to you.
Thank you. Thanks, Manoj. I think that really it ended the session quite well. Thank you, Tarun, for all your insights. It's been a wonderful session. We've had a lot of comments and questions coming in from audience, so quite engaging to that sense. Any more questions or comments which we have not been able to answer, I would request participants to kindly email that to me. I'll drop in my email in the chat box, and we'll try to pick up all the questions that are coming in today. So first of all, thank you, Tarun and Manoj, for your time, for helping us understand the nuances of this topic so very well. Thank you to the audience for being so engaging. And last but not the least, thank you to Team OPPI and Team Indegene for setting up and helping us with the support. Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you for joining in today. Thank you and goodbye.
Thank you so much. Really appreciate it. Thank you, Manoj. Thank you.
Thanks
Thank
a lot,
you, OPPI.
Thanks, Asavri. Thanks, everyone.